The future of education is a question of utmost importance. And the next session will be moderated by someone who's passionate about giving children the opportunities to find their strength and way in life. It all began with a 15-year-old girl who was bored of school, and she promised herself that if she ever had kids of her own, she would create a school that wasn't boring at all. And several years later, she did just that, founding the first Montessori school in Norway. She is a successful businesswoman. Charities and empowerment centers for youth in Norway and abroad have come to life thanks to her commitment to the young generation. Please welcome founder of Partnership for Change, Ingrid Stange.
The issue of education holds many facets. For a large group of children and youth, the mere access to education is an unreachable goal. 2 years away from 2015, around 70 million children are still missing out on their right to education. Although the Millennium Goal number 2 holds the ambition to ensure that children everywhere, boys and girls alike, will be able to complete a full course of primary schooling, we have a long way to go. 700 million, or 10% of the world population, are not able to read. But what about the privileged group who do have access to education? In this part of the world, spending on education increases every year. And from 2000, countries have increased spending by 35%. In the EU countries, average spending as a percentage of GDP was 5.4% in 2009. With an individual range from 8.7 to 4.2%. Children and youth, or the most privileged of these, normally spend more than 20 years from the age 3 to reach a university degree or finish a vocational education. This represents 1/4 of their lifespan. In this section, we will raise the question, is it a privilege? Do we give these youth a meaningful time in school while they are in the educational system? And do we prepare them for a meaningful future afterwards? Do we help them unleash their potential? We live in a world where change happens faster than we have ever seen before. We heard that in the panel earlier. Do we prepare youth for this world? Do we train the young generation to become literates in the term of what the new world requires? The educational system was built in a time when change happened so slowly that we could hardly notice it. The skills needed then were to follow rules, establish processes, and understand and remember the established facts. Today, and even more so in the future, these skills will not bring you very far in society. To succeed now, you need to be able to see and understand the trends as they come. Even more so, you need to be in the forefront of these trends. In the 80s, fast change took the form of technology shifts. We heard about the telefax here earlier. The telefax was one such shift. I can remember when we got the first telefax in my office when I worked in McKinsey. It was a revolution. We totally changed technology, we thought. The telex machine could be thrown out. Today, we talk about total disruption. We no longer need to send information between one office and another. We work on the same working sheet regardless of where we are in the world. So in this society, following the rules and remembering established facts is the only safe thing that you can know will marginalize you in your job. So what will these disruptive times mean in terms of educational needs? While we see an exceptional change, we also know that the need for an even faster change is big, as we talked about earlier this morning. We cannot find 2.5 planets, so we have to totally change the way we are working. So innovation will have to be even faster, And how do we prepare the coming generation and the present generations for the skills needed for this disruption, even in innovation? How can the teacher teach the student when the teacher does not have a clue about what the student needs? Well, we do have some clues. To understand the climatic changes, we need to have basic understanding of science. We need to understand the ecosystems. We need to have a basic understanding of physics. We need to have an understanding of the mathematical relationships. And to avoid historic mistakes, we need to have a thorough understanding of history. Let me give you one example which is very active in the newspapers right now. Our Constitution, which we will very proudly celebrate in 2 days, had a paragraph that we were very ashamed of. Jews were not allowed in the country. In the middle of the last century, or not the last, but the 1800s, this rule was abolished. Still, during the World War II, the Nazis were helped by the Norwegian police to collect all the Jews and send them to Auschwitz. We are not very proud of that. We are ashamed. But then, when we read the newspapers today about another group of people that we should throw out of the country, and that if only performing a minor offense, we should just let them leave the country, why aren't we ashamed? To be able to become the change makers we need, we must allow entrepreneurship to develop, we must allow leadership skills to develop, and we must allow people skills and cognitive empathy to develop. How can we create learning environments that builds a generation that will become the innovative leaders, individuals we need? Ashoka has the goal to make everyone a change maker. How do we prepare for that? Children come to school with an eagerness to learn and with open minds. Society depends upon the children maintaining this eagerness to learn. How can education help students keep the open minds? Dr. Stephen Hughes, Director of the Center for Research and Developmental Education, will talk about his findings and thoughts on this theme. When I first heard Dr. Hughes, I have to admit it was a very emotional minute for me. Having spent 1/3 of my life building and running Montessori schools, I must admit there have been times when the uphill battle was so steep I wondered if it was really worth it. But I must admit, having heard Dr. Hughes talk about his belief in what works in education, I understood it definitely was. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Hughes.